Welcome to Guidance for a Better Life. Today we have a wonderful show that shows the power of prayer. We have somebody that prayed for a teacher and literally within moments had an answer. So whether you're praying for a teacher or something else, today will be a good show for you. And I hope you'll stick through and watch the whole show. Hello, Molly.
Hello.
This is Molly. Molly is a good friend of mine. I've known her for many years, and she's also an author. And she's written many short stories, and we're going to talk about one of them today, and that's
A prayer for a teacher is answered.
Prayer for a Teacher is Answered, and the is answered is really the operative part of this.
Yes.
So if you're praying for a teacher, fine, but if you're praying for something else, if you feel lonely or lost or just something's missing, today's story I think will help you a lot. So, hey.
Hi.
Good. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you start your story out, and your story is in Testimonies of God's Love, Book 1, and I think it's chapter 27.
Mm-hmm.
And we published this a few years ago. And you started out how wonderful your life was. And then later in the story, how you felt lost and things weren't right.
Yeah.
So how did you start out with a great life? Everything was fine. You didn't miss a meal.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I've had a very wonderful life. I feel like God has really blessed me with a wonderful family, friends, food.
You never missed a meal.
Never missed.
You had a roof over your head.
Roof over my head.
So you're very fortunate. You had good parents.
Very fortunate. Yep. Yes, I did. And
so what were you searching for? All through the book, and I think a lot of you can relate to this. Molly had everything going. Everything seemed fine.
On the
but
surface.
There was on the
Yeah.
surface, that's it. And I think so many people feel this way. But deep down, how did you feel?
I felt lost, and I felt like something was missing in my life.
And somewhere in your story you said you even felt disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
So on the surface, and so many people I think can relate to this story. I'm so grateful you're coming in today. Everything's beautiful on the surface, but deep down, something's missing, something's off. You had a lot of friends, you had family, yet in your story you told us how you felt alone most of the time.
Yeah, I did feel alone. I also felt kind of purposeless with my life. I didn't know really where I wanted to go or what my reason for being
no
here was.
No real direction, just kind of getting up every day and
living life, but not truly living.
So on the surface, everything's fine, but deep down, something, whatever it was, something was missing.
Yeah, and yes.
Okay.
I had a lack of peace inside too. Felt like I was kind of anxious and always searching for something, and I wasn't sure really what it was earlier on, but I was looking. Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate. They're looking for something, but they're not even sure what they're looking for till they find it, which you did, and that's later in the story.
Yes.
How did you search for it? I know you mentioned a whole bunch of things you tried.
Mm-hmm. I tried counseling for some time in high school. I did yoga classes, tried different types of meditation, went to church with friends, and I also traveled a lot around the world.
Where did you go?
I went to Europe and also to Asia, and I felt like I was through that process searching again, not quite sure what it was that I was looking for, but
you did some beautiful things, travel and yoga.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are blessed by yoga.
Yeah,
helps them. Did you have anything? Did any of those things you did help scratch that itch or whatever was inside you were missing?
No, they didn't. Maybe temporarily there'd be a little surface peace or surface comfort, but there was something deeper inside that was missing.
So it helped a little bit, short term, but it wasn't what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So now this is a really cool part of your story. It blows me away what you did and your courage to follow the nudge you got. Once God gave you a suggestion to answer your prayer, it took some courage to follow through. And I think a lot of folks, you maybe get an answer to your prayer, but it just doesn't feel right or you don't have the confidence to follow it. And Molly has a great example, in some ways almost a little scary, by yourself where you end up going, but it worked out nicely. So one day, why did one day you decide to go up to the mountains? You lived where, in Charlottesville?
I lived in Charlottesville, Virginia.
And that's maybe 45 minutes or an hour.
Yeah,
Yep. Why did one day you just decided by yourself, right? Hop in a car and head to the mountains?
Well, I felt like I was looking for some peace. I just felt anxious inside and just unhappy, and I felt like I had reached a certain kind of bottom in my life. I had come back home after traveling and hadn't found what I was looking for, and was working and thinking about going back to school, but just really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was a young adult in my early 20s. And I decided to take a drive and see if that would maybe bring some peace.
And you said you're at your bottom, so this wasn't the normal searching. This was something different this day. You decided to get in the car by yourself and drive to the mountains where you did your prayer, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yes.
Was it like the last straw, or were you that far down, or?
I felt like I felt like nothing was working anymore. Like I don't know that I was in a deep depression, but I felt hopeless.
It sounded like from your story you went through everything, yoga and travel and friends, and I think you said you took up dancing, camping, hiking,
meditation.
Check, and it wasn't lasting peace.
No.
Or it didn't fill that void. So one day, this particular day, which you write about, you drove from Charlottesville, Virginia, you're in your 20s, and you drove about an hour away up to the mountains, up where our school is actually.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear your story, and
Sure.
I think the folks listening will find this interesting.
So I was just following my heart as far as which way to go. I grew up going hiking in the mountains, but hadn't really explored different parts of my backyard.
So you didn't have a map. You mostly
I didn't have a map.
Followed your heart.
Yeah, I was just following my heart.
Turn left, turn right, stop.
That road looks neat. Go down that for a little ways. And at this one particular turnoff right off the Blue Ridge Parkway, I pulled over and I just started crying. And this prayer came out of my heart. And I just felt so alone and lost and helpless. And lacking peace and all sorts of things. I just prayed to God to really, I felt like I couldn't do it alone.
Did you have a formal prayer, or were you just putting out your heart to God?
It was just my heart.
It was just coming out.
Yeah, just coming out.
Sometimes that's the best prayer, when you just speak from the heart. And of course, He's listening.
Yeah.
You said you were crying. Were you wailing? Or?
I would say I was sobbing.
Sobbing. So it was a pretty serious cry.
Yeah.
And you started praying to God, which the prayer was simply talking from your heart. And what did you ask for?
I said that I felt like I had tried all I could on my own, and that I prayed for a teacher. And I felt like I really needed a teacher to show me the way home to God. And I felt like it would have something to do with nature, my teacher would, because I had somehow always felt more relaxed in the woods.
And you had camped and hiked and stuff.
But I didn't put limitations on it. It was really just a prayer from my heart.
But other than
God.
A prayer to fill this void, it's interesting that you knew a teacher. You were actually fairly specific. Did that surprise you, that the words came out teacher, other than just help with whatever this disconnection or whatever, this hole in your heart?
Yeah, in some ways I think it did surprise me, because I don't know that I'd thought before then that I necessarily needed a teacher.
It's almost like in your prayer you started getting the first like breadcrumb.
Yeah.
That when it came out of your heart, you actually said teacher. That's the first. It sounds like the first specific insight you had of what the issue was. So right there, that's pretty good. While you're talking to God, you knew it was a teacher. It wasn't some different career. It wasn't a different relationship. You weren't supposed to live somewhere else or change your lifestyle.
Yeah.
A teacher, right away, that's a start.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you hear a booming voice?
I didn't hear a booming voice. It felt like the crying subsided. I felt like my prayer had gone out. You know, I had said what I needed to say and turned the car around and started still following my heart about which direction to go. And about a minute, 30 seconds later, turned down a road, and there was a paper plate sign on a post that said Nature School with a little arrow pointing the direction.
Pretty simple. A plain old paper plate.
Yeah.
Like for barbecue or sandwich
Mm-hmm.
or something. Okay.
And at that point, I just knew in my heart that that was God's answer to my prayer. That
Paper plate?
No, not the paper plate.
You're hungry? Maybe you needed a snack.
It was a sign. It was a sign.
It
from
was a
God.
sign, a paper
Yeah,
plate.
It was.
But that it said Nature
Nature
School.
School.
And you knew, past the joke in here and
Mm-hmm.
having fun with you, thanks for that. But you knew it was more than a joke. It was serious.
Yes.
That was a sign.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do after that?
Well, I kind of took a deep breath because I had just prayed and God heard me.
30 seconds to a
30
minute
seconds
later.
to a minute later. And
You knew. It's one of those
Mm-hmm.
things you just knew. Did you know it up here or was it more in your heart?
it was more in my heart.
And that's something, if you can start learning to follow that little voice inside, a lot of your prayers might be being answered, but you're not picking up the signs. And that's something best usually listening from the heart more than the head. So that was luckily you were aware of that, and you knew. You didn't know here, I guess, but you felt it down here.
Yeah, I felt it in my heart.
Then what'd you do? You sit there and have lunch, or was
No,
that it?
I just took a deep breath and felt like I felt like I had the encouragement to go follow that sign
Okay.
and start driving down the road. And
What kind of road were you on?
it was a gravel road at that point. It had come off of a paved road and was now a gravel
Okay.
road. And I started driving and went probably about a mile, maybe a mile and a half. It's beautiful through the mountains, over a little creek.
Are there a lot of people around, or
No,
is this out in the woods?
It was out in the woods. And
So
there's
you're going farther and farther
Farther.
away from people you know,
Civilization,
from
yeah.
civilization.
Yeah.
That can be scary.
Yeah, I felt like alive inside, following this
Like
prayer.
a boost of energy.
Yeah, like a boost of
something-
energy.
You're on the trail
I was
now.
I
Okay.
could smell what I was being led to or
Okay.
something.
But still, it took some courage.
Mhm.
You were by yourself, for a
Yep.
single young lady, to drive off the beaten path and down this trail.
Yeah,
And if you hadn't had that courage, perhaps this prayer would not have been answered.
yeah,
If you didn't follow that nudge, the simple paper plate with a little note on it, Nature School, if you didn't realize that was a sign, it's amazing how all these little things add up. So you're going down this road, and then you
Yeah.
said you stopped partway
I
down?
stopped and I felt like I started to listen to the what ifs. The Molly, this is a dirt road. You don't know what people are out there. I saw sort of an abandoned building and started to feel a little bit afraid, or listen to that.
Okay.
The mind saying,
What could happen?
what could happen?
Are you safe? And all
Yeah.
those things.
But my heart still was saying, keep going. And
So this is starting to have a little fear,
Mm-hmm.
a little maybe this is not such a good idea,
Mm-hmm.
all the what could happen, this could happen or that. Yet your heart was stronger in this case.
yes.
So is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
Your heart, a knowingness in your heart that you're going in the right direction, although you didn't really know where you're going, but you knew that was the way to go,
Mm-hmm.
that was stronger than what your head was telling you.
Yes.
Okay.
So I kept driving and got to a place where there was another sign, not a paper plate this time, but a wooden sign that said school one direction and parking lot another direction. And I parked my car and started walking down the road. And it was a beautiful spring day, almost early summer. And I actually started skipping. I felt
Just like a child.
just like a child. I felt very alive and like my prayer was answered, and I didn't know what it was going to look like.
Right. You hadn't met anybody.
I hadn't met anybody.
But your heart knew on some
Yeah.
level. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I hope this helps folks follow the signs to conclusion of the prayers you have. You don't always hear a booming voice. In fact, I suppose most of the time you don't. That's if you wait for that, you're probably not going to follow the guidance or the leads. And this is a beautiful example. You just knew, well, first of all, you were driving. You followed your heart which way to turn and ended up seeing this sign.
Yeah.
Then your heart told you that was a sign, literally, to your prayer. Now you're going down the road, and the what if, I could get hurt, or maybe scary things could happen. But once again, this is just such a beautiful story. You didn't let the fear stop you. Your heart overrode those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
So now you're skipping like a child. Do you always skip, or was that?
No, it was definitely unusual.
But that's like childlike, like a child of God skipping home or something.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah. And so
Now what?
I kept walking, and a little further down the gravel road still, I saw two men, and one was D4, your son.
My son, Del 4.
Yeah, Del 4. And the other was Roland, who was an intern at the school. And they were very gracious. I introduced myself and said that I'd seen the sign for nature school at the road, and they looked perplexed, like there's no sign, at the turn off from the
It's
main
very
road.
seldom is there a sign. If we know somebody's coming who's lost or doesn't know the area, we put a paper plate up, something simple, and we usually take it down that day or the next day. So coincidentally, or maybe not, the sign was left in place, and it normally would not be. And also, normally there's nobody working on the road that far from the school and our home. That was unusual. I don't know if we've ever had two people doing some small repairs on the gravel road, and the timing was amazing.
It really
Leaving
was.
the sign out, which normally is not there very long, and then somebody to greet you. I guess they greeted you.
Yeah, they did.
They were too scary,
No,
were they?
they weren't
Okay.
scary at all. Very gracious, and offered to give me a tour and told me a little bit about the school. And it was a beautiful setting. I really felt at home there and very comfortable with both of them and felt completely safe.
Molly's talking about the Nature Awareness School, where we learn more about the nature of the divine and our own divine nature. This is not to promote the nature school, even though we're talking about my school that I've taught at for, 25, 26 years. The story here is about a prayer being answered in a profound way, and the courage and that you had to follow your heart. That's what this story is about, not so much the school. So did they give you a full tour, or just you saw the pond?
Yep, they showed me the pond and the buildings and told me a little bit about the classes that you offered. And
Did they feed you lunch? Or
No.
How long did you stay?
my guess would be maybe a half an hour.
So they weren't working on the road. Oh. But that's fine. I'd much rather have them show you around. That's very wonderful. They're good people. So I guess you went back to your car?
Yep, went back
We're
to my
still
car.
skipping?
At that point, I wasn't on the outside, but I felt like I was on the inside.
Okay.
Very
All right.
happy.
And you got back to the car. How do you feel at this point? Did you know this was the answer?
I felt like I had found what I was looking for. I hadn't met you yet, but there was a peace inside and a joy that I hadn't known before.
What would you suggest to people that have a prayer like you? For example, that feel, I bet there's so many people listening today that feel lonely from time to time, even when they're around people. Maybe wonder what's their purpose. And God gives us all a purpose, although sometimes it takes a while to find it. Do you have any suggestions for somebody who has a prayer? Not for a teacher necessarily, but for something to fill some void that scratch some itch maybe inside.
Well, I think the one thing from this story that really stuck out to me is that God cares about us, and He really hears our prayers.
Well, right there, that God hears your prayer. In your case, it's phenomenal. It was is pretty much over the top. But even in cases where, have you had other prayers in life?
Yes.
Do you feel, even if they're not answered quite as quickly and dramatically, do you feel over time that they have been answered?
Yes.
So in your experience, do you feel God genuinely does hear your prayers?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I can guarantee that. I've taught spiritual retreats up here in the mountains, beautiful place to live, and a beautiful pond and beautiful people. For over about 26 years now, hundreds of retreats, and I can guarantee you God hears your prayers. I've seen it year after year. Not often as dramatic as yours. That was pretty quick. Sometimes we're not ready for the answer to a prayer. You were ready. But if you weren't ready, God might have lined things up, but taken his time until you were ready. Sometimes we want a prayer, we have a prayer, but we're not ready really for the answer. So if you pray to God, one, he does hear you and he cares, like Molly said. Two, if it takes a little time, he may be lining things up, and it takes time. Even for God, it takes time to line up things and situations that are best for you. But do not give up. Keep praying and keep looking for those signs. And I think you would suggest they look with the heart at least as much as with the brain. And I think that's the missing ingredient, why some people don't realize God's responding. They're looking for the answer up here in the head, and that may be the case, but it seems like you followed your heart is what made this successful for you.
Yes.
If you had just followed your head, would this have worked out?
No, I don't.
It doesn't seem like it.
And that too, I feel like with the answer to the prayer, there was a nudge in my heart to go down the road that I was being guided. And I believe also for the people out there, if they listen to those little
whisperings, but you listen up here, is it more down here?
More in the heart.
Yeah. And if you have spend quiet time, now you were in a car crying, I don't know if that's quiet, but for a lot of people, maybe turn off the radio, the TV, and all the cool things in life, but turn them off and maybe have a few quiet minutes. It'll be easier to hear the response of God. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Just that God loves us.
God does love us. Yeah. Excellent. He absolutely does. And do you know that for sure?
Yes, I do.
What a blessing that is. Would you wish everybody to know that like you know that?
Yeah.
Yes, God does love you. And if you ever feel it or you know it on a deeper level, it can change your life. And I wish everyone out there would feel that or experience or have a deep knowing that God truly loves you. He does hear your prayers and he does care about you, just like Molly said. So maybe not looking for a teacher, but if you relate to anything Molly said, maybe feel a void, maybe a loneliness, you're not sure of your purpose, what do you have to lose? Like Molly, she tried a whole lot of things and traveled the world, and none of that satisfied her in a permanent level. What do you have to lose? Pray. You don't have to have a formal prayer. Just speak to God, and he'll listen. And I think sometimes he likes just people speaking from their heart more than a formal prayer from the head. So anybody can pray to God. Just tell him how you feel, and then listen. Just listen. And if you don't hear a response right away, listen the next day and the next day. He will respond. And I hope this show has blessed you today. Thank you very much.